I was there the night Elvis Presley shot his television. Not metaphorically, not in some drug-induced haze that the tabloids love to write about. I mean, I was standing 15 feet away when the king of rock and roll pulled a snub-nosed .38 from his waistband and put a bullet clean through the screen of a brand new RCA console TV in his penthouse suite at the International Hotel. The year was 1973. Las Vegas. August heat so thick you could taste the cigarette smoke and desperation hanging in the desert air. But Elvis wasn't shooting at the television because he was crazy. He was shooting because he just realized he was a prisoner. The discovery. Let me take you back 6 hours earlier, to the moment everything shattered. Elvis had just come off stage. The jumpsuit, that iconic white leather and gold studs affair, was soaked through. Not from the stage lights, though those burned hot enough to cook a man alive. No, this was different. This was the cold sweat of a man who'd just been handed a piece of paper that would change everything. I can still smell that dressing room. The expensive cologne, Brut, always Brut, mixed with leather and the metallic tang of exhaustion. Elvis collapsed into the chair in front of his mirror, gold rings clinking against the vanity as he braced himself. The paper in his hand was shaking. It was a rejection letter, but not just any rejection. This was the death certificate of Elvis's dream to tour the world. Japan had offered him a fortune, $3 million for a single week of concerts. Europe was begging, Australia, South America. The entire planet wanted to see Elvis Presley perform live, and the offers kept stacking up on his manager's desk like chips at a blackjack table. Colonel Tom Parker had said no to all of them. Every single one. The reason? That's where the story gets dark. The man in the shadows. You need to understand something about Colonel Tom Parker. The man wasn't even a colonel. That was an honorary title from some Louisiana governor who probably owed him money. His real name was Andreas Cornelius van Kook, and he was born in the Netherlands in 1909. More importantly, he was an illegal immigrant. Parker had jumped ship in America decades earlier, and he never applied for citizenship. Why? Because there were rumors, dark rumors about a young woman found dead back in Holland. Rumors about why a man would flee his country and never, ever go back. Without a passport, Parker couldn't leave the United States, which meant Elvis couldn't either. Think about that. The biggest entertainer in human history, a man who'd sold over 1 billion records, who'd made Hollywood millions, who'd changed the face of American culture forever, was trapped in his own country because his manager was a fugitive. Elvis didn't know this until that night in 1973. I watched him read that paper 3 times. Then I watched the realization crawl across his face like a shadow. His jaw clenched. Those rings started tapping against the vanity. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous rhythm that sounded like a countdown. "He's been lying to me," Elvis said quietly. His voice had that deep Memphis drawl, but underneath it was something I'd never heard before. Betrayal. 20 years. 20 goddamn years, and he's been lying to me. The Golden Cage. Here's what you need to know about the relationship between Elvis and the Colonel. Parker discovered Elvis in 1955, a young, hungry kid from Tupelo, Mississippi who could make teenage girls scream just by moving his hips. Parker saw gold. Not art, not revolution, just pure extractable gold. And he mined it brilliantly. By 1956, Parker had negotiated a deal where he took 25% of everything Elvis earned. Then it became 50%. By the 1970s, the Colonel was taking somewhere between 50 and 75% of Elvis's income, depending on who you asked and what lawyers were in the room. But it wasn't just the money. Parker controlled everything. What movies Elvis made, what songs he recorded, where he performed, who he could talk to. The Colonel even opened Elvis's mail. The International Hotel, later renamed the Hilton, was Parker's masterpiece of control. In 1969, he'd negotiated a deal for Elvis to perform there exclusively. 2 shows a night sometimes, months at a time, year after year. Elvis was making the hotel millions, and the Colonel was getting kickbacks from the casino to keep him there. Las Vegas became Elvis's prison, a golded, luxurious, air-conditioned prison with showgirls and steaks and standing ovations every night, but a prison nonetheless. Because while Elvis was trapped on that stage, unable to tour the world, unable to grow as an artist, unable to break free, the Colonel was downstairs gambling hundreds of thousands of dollars at the roulette tables. Elvis's money, always Elvis's money.
The confrontation. The night of the television shooting, Elvis called an emergency meeting. It was past midnight. The suite was thick with tension and cheap cigar smoke. That was Parker's smell. Always those Dutch Masters cigars, the kind that cost $3 and smelled like burning tires. Parker walked in wearing one of his ridiculous outfits. The man dressed like a carnival barker, even in private. Loud checkered suit, that stupid cane he didn't need, and a Panama hat that never left his head. "What's this about, son?" Parker said. He always called Elvis son, even though he was only 20 years older. It was a power move, a reminder of the hierarchy. Elvis stood up from the couch, 6 feet tall, wearing a silk robe, his face still marked with stage makeup. Those rings, always those massive gold rings, caught the light as he pointed at Parker. "Why can't I leave the country, Colonel?" The room went silent. Parker's face, that round, sweaty face that looked like uncooked dough, didn't change expression. "We've been through this, Elvis. The timing isn't right. The American market has bought every record I've ever made." Elvis's voice was rising now, that southern temper coming through. "Japan wants me. England wants me. They're offering millions and you keep saying no. Why?" "Business decisions, son. You wouldn't understand." "Do you have a passport, Colonel?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Parker's hand tightened around his cane. For just a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or the look of a con man who knows the jig is up. "That's none of your concern." "It is when it's my career." Elvis swept his arm across the coffee table, sending ashtrays and glasses crashing to the floor. "You can't leave the country, can you? And because you can't leave, I can't leave. I'm stuck here in this goddamn desert because you're hiding something." Parker stood up, surprisingly calm. "I think you need to settle down, Elvis. Maybe take one of your little pills and..." That's when Elvis hit him. Not hard, just an open-handed shove to the chest that sent Parker stumbling backward into a chair. The old man's hat fell off, revealing the sweat-soaked bald head underneath. "You're fired," Elvis said. His voice was quiet again, but it carried weight. "Get out. We're done." The bill. Here's where the story gets truly cruel. 3 days later, Elvis received a document from Parker's lawyers. It was itemized, professional, and absolutely devastating. It was a bill. Over the years, Parker had been advancing money to Elvis for living expenses, for the entourage, for the cars and houses and jewelry. All of it, Parker claimed, was loans that Elvis owed back to the Colonel's management company. The total? Nearly $8 million. But it got worse. Parker also claimed he owned the rights to all of Elvis's recordings from before 1973. His entire back catalog, Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, everything that made him a legend, Parker argued he'd negotiated those rights into his management contract. The legal threat was clear. If Elvis tried to break the contract, Parker would sue for the $8 million and tie up all of Elvis's music in court for years. Elvis couldn't afford it. Despite making hundreds of millions over his career, the combination of Parker's percentages, terrible movie deals, and Elvis's own spending had left him surprisingly cash poor. He was trapped. I watched Elvis read that bill in his suite. The same suite where he'd shot the television, The same suite where he'd spend the next 4 years, coming down to perform like a trained animal before retreating back into his cage. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he very carefully folded the paper, walked over to that broken television, and placed it on top of the shattered screen. "He owns me," Elvis said quietly. "He always owned me." The final rebellion. But Elvis Presley didn't go quietly. In 1974, he started talking to new lawyers. He began documenting everything, every shady deal, every percentage point, every time Parker had negotiated against Elvis's interests to benefit the casinos. He started telling people the truth about Parker, about the passport, about the control, about the cage. It was a slow rebellion, the kind that happens in contracts and depositions rather than fistfights, but it was rebellion nonetheless. The Colonel felt it. You could see it in how he started hovering more, controlling more tightly. He cut off some of Elvis's friends from the entourage. He put pressure on the record label. He tightened the cage. In December 1976, Elvis performed what would be his last concert at the International Hotel. I was there for that show too. He came out late, which was normal by then. The jumpsuit was tight. Elvis had gained weight, and nobody had the courage to tell the king he needed to lose it. He moved slower than he used to. The voice was still there, but you could hear the exhaustion in it. Before the final song, Elvis did something unusual. He stopped and looked out at the audience. Really looked, like he was trying to memorize every face. Then he turned and looked at the wings of the stage, where Colonel Parker always stood during performances. Their eyes met. I can't tell you what passed between them in that moment, but I saw Elvis's expression, and it said everything. Regret, rage, resignation, and maybe, just maybe, a final spark of defiance. He sang "Can't Help Falling in Love" like he always did to close the show. But this time, when he got to the line, "Take my hand, take my whole life too," his voice cracked. The audience thought it was emotion. I think it was something else. I think it was Elvis Presley realizing that someone had already taken his whole life and he'd never get it back. The question. Elvis died on August 16, 1977 in Memphis. He was 42 years old. The official cause was heart failure, but anyone who knew him understood it was more complicated than that. It was exhaustion, depression, the weight of being trapped for 20 years by a man who saw him nothing more than a product to be exploited. Colonel Parker didn't attend the funeral. Instead, he immediately moved to secure his claim to Elvis's estate. Within days, he was negotiating deals, selling rights, making sure he got his percentage even after his client was in the ground. He'd squeeze every last dollar out of Elvis Presley, alive or dead. So let me ask you something. Would you trade your freedom for fame? Would you let someone own you, control every aspect of your life, every decision, every opportunity, in exchange for standing ovations and platinum records? Elvis Presley had everything the world said was worth having. The voice, the looks, the money, the adoration of millions. But he spent the last years of his life as a prisoner in a golden cage, performing the same songs in the same hotel for the same tourists, while the whole world waited beyond the borders he could never cross. The king of rock and roll died without ever ruling his own life. That television Elvis shot in 1973, the hotel kept it. They put it in storage, this bizarre piece of history, a brand new RCA console with a bullet hole clean through the screen. I think about that television sometimes, about how Elvis put that bullet exactly in the center, right through some mindless program he couldn't stand to watch anymore. Maybe he wasn't shooting the TV at all. Maybe he was shooting at the reflection he saw in it, a man in a cage, performing the same act over and over, trapped by a contract he couldn't break and a manager he couldn't escape.
the legacy. Here's what they don't tell you about Elvis's final years. He knew. He knew he was being exploited. He knew Parker was lying to him. He knew the international tours he desperately wanted would have revitalized his career and given him the artistic freedom he craved. But he was caught in a machine of his own making, surrounded by lawyers and contracts, and a man who held all the cards. The tragedy of Elvis isn't that he died young. The tragedy is that he died trapped. So the next time you hear Suspicious Minds or watch one of those Vegas concert films, remember, you're watching a man in a cage, giving everything he has to an audience he can barely see through the stage lights, while his jailer counts the money in the shadows. That's the real story of Elvis Presley and Colonel Tom Parker. The king and the con man, the prisoner and the warden. The greatest act of theft in entertainment history, performed not with a gun or a mask, but with a contract and a smile. And it all started with a lie about a passport.